Ross Kennedy is the founder of Fortis and Analysis and senior fellow for the Security Studies Group. He joins me now. Ross, thanks so much for being here. Good to see you. So I know that there are a number of things that play into this, because the easy thing is to just say, oh, well, it's obviously, very obviously, we have a labor problem because the administration was paying people to stay home. That's part of it, but there's a lot more that goes into this. So talk to us a little bit about what really are the big factors that contributed to this logjam at all these ports around the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me on, Dana. The beginning of this was all the way back when China locked down at the very beginning of last year. That is a very normal thing for China to have about a 3-week delay somewhat early in quarter one as a result of the Lunar New Year. We factored that in. The problem was with the COVID outbreak expanding in so much severity during the January and February, we had an 8 to 10 week lockdown. Orders were continuing to come in from American buyers who would be importing things. It was sort of business as usual here. It wasn't there. The problem was we began to lock down. The ocean carriers, all the logistics companies, the middlemen, they began to pull all the capacity out so that they wouldn't go bankrupt with ships going everywhere that empty. And so all of that capacity left the market. China reopened and said, hey, we're ready to start shipping again. American importers said, great, we're ready to start buying again, but there was no capacity to be had. And it takes a very long time. If you idle a ship, it takes 5-10 times as long to get it back into service as it did to idle it and send it somewhere. You've got to get crews back online. And we're doing it now in a situation where, a virus had pretty clearly been spreading very fast and nobody really knew what they knew. So that a lot of that uncertainty in the first half of 2020 just kept building and building and building. Capacity wasn't coming into the market to move things and keep the situation somewhat stable and normalized. But by the time everything came back in and everybody was still shipping, we had lockdowns, we had stimulus, we had dollars diverting away from restaurants and services and entertainment towards buying things in the home. So we just kept making the outlet in the market to get things into market a little bit smaller, while we just kept dumping extra production in at the top. And at some point, it just became a situation where we can't do enough to unclog the mess using the processes and procedures that we've always optimized around.
Yeah, and folks are saying that, well, and I say folks, but experts are saying that this actually is going to probably impact Christmas shopping, which not to diminish, the concerns about that, but I think that also sort of suggests, maybe we should be a little bit more reliant on things that are produced here in the United States. And I know we can't do that with absolutely everything, but it seems like this is a great time right now to make that argument and point to, all the ships that are waiting out there, just kind of anchored, waiting to offload their stuff. Just seems like a great time to make that point to everybody.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's, localism has gone, or decentralization, or distributism. There's a lot of ways to sort of describe the process of moving as many supply chains as possible closer to the consumer, to the end user. What we have now with globalized supply chains is a thing that is bought on a shelf may have parts, pieces, and components from 10, 15 different countries that all had to move through time and space to get there. And so the idea of a localism or distributism, whatever general framework you want to put around moving things much closer to the end users here in the US, we have the ability to do a lot of that. Things that are very labor intensive or have a very high environmental cost. We have to have real discussions around how do we achieve those things through better environmental management or better labor practices or more automation and technology. But there are other things that we make overseas that don't need to be made overseas at all. There's no reason for us to be making medicine in another part of the world when we have the most advanced R&D and manufacturing capabilities for pharmaceuticals on Earth. Most of the research and R&D being done on these things is done inside the United States. We generate this technical data. We export the technical data for a thing to be made elsewhere that could easily be made here, just to ship it back to us, because it cuts a few cents off of each vial of whatever drug is, or it cuts 25 cents off of a pack of Tylenol. We don't need to be doing those things. So to the extent we should be moving things back here, we can and we should be.
Normally, let me ask you this: at what point does this become? Because I recognize that this can be also a national security issue.
Very much so.
Describe that for us, because because it is. I mean, it's a major concern. What can you tell us about this, and what if anything can be done to alleviate this?
Yeah, so from an economic security standpoint, what we are very much seeing is if a company is a retailer, whether they're privately owned or whether they're publicly held because they're traded on, NASDAQ or they're traded on, New York Stock Exchange, whatever it may be, those guys are the publicly held ones have the ability generally to tap into much larger pools of working capital so they can pay the big rates to keep their inventory full. And thus, they're the ones that have product at the time at Christmas when a smaller retailer, a mom and pop, or maybe like a regional chain that doesn't quite have those deep pockets or they're family owned, but they've got 20 stores in the state. Those guys are the ones that are really getting hit the hardest right now because they have the same, they're competing against the giant, that have for the same level of consumer demand in dollars, but they don't have the financial carrying capacity to kind of get them through this crisis. From an economic standpoint, they're facing a situation where the sharks are about to start eating the minnows. And it's quietly starting now, but we're going to see, I think, a wave over the next 24 months of merger and acquisition activity where small to mid-sized businesses that tend to be family owned or tend to be more closely held within a given community or state, they're going to start falling to the Amazons, to the Walmarts, to the Targets, whatever it may be, because they're going to just simply be out of money. And the longer this congestion goes on, the longer these really elevated freight rates goes on, the more likely it is that they're just not going to be able to service their debt, and they're going to be an attractive buyout target because they do have a footprint, they do have real estate, they do have infrastructure, and so somebody bigger than them is going to want to come take them out and utilize them to grow.